What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Issues of Faith. Glad you were with us. We almost did not have a show this week, but we really felt like it was more important now than ever. Churches may be needed now more than ever. And this unique, challenging, scary time, churches are closed. They're meeting virtually. They're having virtual worship. But they've made the tough decision and the appropriate decision to close their doors to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. So we want to talk about that. Every church is different, but every church now faces some very similar problems. And we are very happy to have with us the minister with the Schrader Lane Church of Christ, 1,200 members there near TSU, over 100 years old, Minister Robert Gardenhire, joining us via Zoom. Thank you, Minister Gardenhire. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Zoom, the new way everybody's communicating. I want to go back to, this is our first show since all churches have stopped meeting because of this virus. I want to go back to the decision that you went through, the debate that went in internally, because when you closed your church to these public worship, we weren't where we are now. And so how controversial was it? Kind of take us to the debate there in your church about should we close, should we not close?
Okay. Well, it began with us just being aware collectively, I say our elders, our ministers, and our congregation of the serious nature of what was taking place. As 3 weeks ago, as the weekend approached, we were seeing more and more, of course, in the news, locally and nationally, about what was taking place. So on a Friday evening, we sat and listened to 3 of our physicians who are members of the church, who gave us very clear information as to the dangers and what was taking place. And based on that conversation, then we gathered with our key leaders and made the decision. Frankly, knowing what our physicians told us and feeling what we felt because of what was quite prevalent in the news, we knew what we had to do, so we began to do so. So the work was the matter of communicating to our members, letting them know precisely what we would do, when we would do it, and what provisions we had in place and would put in place that would allow us to continue to be in front of them with the Lord's message and with the streaming nature of worship services.
And so to put everything in perspective, we're recording this on March 31st, and you're saying, so obviously the last day in March, this has been a long month, March.
Yes.
And you stopped worshiping 3 weeks ago. So for the last 3 weeks, you've stopped the public worship. That decision made, that's fascinating, with doctors there in your congregation helping you. Were there people in the church that disagreed, that said, no, I think this sends the wrong message. The church is needed now more than ever. People want to come together and worship, and I think it sends the wrong message. Were there some people that pushed back?
I wouldn't say pushed back, but there were a very few people who expressed the depth of their interest in coming together. They were very respectful in telling us that, but they just felt that we weren't yet at the point of needing to suspend our worship services. However, my thrill is that once we made that decision, communicated to the congregation through various means, on that Sunday morning 3 weeks ago, there were only 4 people who showed up to worship. So the word got out and the people cooperated.
The word got out and the people cooperated. And this is a big church, 1,200 members. What are the biggest challenges now facing your church? And I think this would be, again, universal. Every church is different. Every pastor knows their church in a way that only that pastor knows their church. So I guess I'm asking you uniquely to your church, but also just universally, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the church now as worship has been suspended?
Yes. Well, we did a situation plan that we shared with all of our leaders where we outline specifically what the threats are. So there were about 7 areas of threats. The first one's associated specifically with suspending our worship. And what that means to us is that we tend to have the risk of losing contact with our members, which means that we also have the risk of our members losing contact with God. And that's what we're all about. One of the things that we say about worship and our vision, we want our worship to be genuine worship. Genuine worship means that it's not a show, it's a connection with God. So that's a risk. And potentially the loss of those assemblies means that we're also not able to readily assist people with their needs, whether they are benevolent needs, financial needs, health in terms of their emotional needs, and even mental health. We want to be there for that, and not being in worship sort of distances us from readily meeting those demands.
Are you worried, and it sounds like as I listen to that, are you worried people might drift away then during this time? If they're not physically coming to church, are you worried there could be a drift?
I'm not really worried about that. In the absence of countermeasures, I would worry about it. I would worry that people who are not connected socially and emotionally and spiritually will drift and do whatever is opportune for them. But our mantra at the Schrader Lane Church is that we are a well-connected church. And to live true to that, we must have things in place that even in this kind of circumstance allow us to maintain those connections, all kinds of connections. So our zones, which are 17 in number, which are regions throughout the greater Nashville community, allow us to have a large church function as though it were a smaller church, and our people communicate with one another. If our people will communicate with one another and stay connected to our objectives, then I'm not worried, because I really believe we can stay connected to God. Another reason I'm not worried is because in these 3 weeks of our streaming service, we have seen to a greater degree than I anticipated participation on the part of our members and the general public. We literally have had more people attending our services through the streaming than we have prior to this on a physical basis. So I believe that there's going to be quite a resilience of faithfulness of people because of this. Some of the responses that we've received from members saying things like, "I will never take worship for granted again," tell me that this is an opportunity to inspire people and to instill in them the value of our coming together and really being a loving community that churches are intended to be.
What do you think churches need to be doing right now? What is the number one role, or the top few roles that the churches need to be meeting in the community right now?
Well, I think it sort of falls into 2 categories. One of them I would refer to as challenges, and the other I would refer to as responsibilities. I would start with the responsibilities. Since churches and faith-based organizations do play key roles in the community in terms of benevolence, in terms of supporting the works of the community, it's also incumbent upon us to be examples in terms of understanding the situation and making the necessary adjustments. It's our responsibility to help our members to appreciate, as we have faith, that we're not suspending our faith, that we're really demonstrating our faith by taking the measures and precautions that we're taking. Those are our responsibilities. When churches lack some of the resources, perhaps, that churches like ourselves and numerous others across our community and our greater community, we also have the responsibility of assisting them and providing such that they can serve and be part of service. We have a responsibility to our government and to those who are our health professionals. Those of us who are in faith-based organizations are not on an island. We're part of a much greater community, and that's a responsibility that we have to face squarely, particularly in a time like this. We also have a big responsibility to encourage people. As I sort of assessed what was taking place over the first few days after the tornado, and as the coronavirus impact became clear, it appeared to me that we would benefit as a community by having our spiritual leaders really supply the encouragement that members of the community need. That's a responsibility that we have, but it's also an opportunity. So when I talk about responsibilities, I think those are a few of the major responsibilities. We have to be a part of not only spiritually and religiously saving our community, but in a crisis like this, we have to be hand in hand with those very capable people and those knowledgeable scientists and medical professionals in doing all the right things to keep all of our people moving together in the same direction.
How scared do you feel like people are right now? And the people you talk to, you know, I agree that there is a responsibility now to be leaders and to help people spiritually, but how scared are people in this time? There's so much change, there's so much uncertainty. I wanted to announce the day that we're recording this because the news changes so quickly, but I mean, what are you seeing? How scared are people, uncomfortable are people? How much anxiety is there out there right now?
Well, it runs the gamut, and some of that is good news, some of that is bad news. There are people who are frightened. I think we all have a healthy fear and respect for the potential of this circumstance. There are some who are perhaps on the verge of being depressed and debilitated by it. I'm not personally aware of persons who are in desperate or dire straits, but I am aware that many people are concerned and they're stymied a bit by the circumstance. On the other end, though, of the spectrum are those people who just assume that this is a passing event, a rapidly passing event, and that we're near to business as usual. I'm more concerned about the latter than the former. I think we all should have a healthy degree of understanding and respect for these circumstances.
All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We'll continue the discussion. I want to ask, you were in contact with the mayor as we were talking about closing worship, and so I want to talk a little bit about that and some other things. So we'll take a break, be back right after this.